Without a gavel, I'm going to call to order the Transportation Authority Board of Directors meeting of February 12, 2018. Chair's report, I will just say, if I haven't told you already, I'm the happy new owner of an electric bike, and I am just loving it. This is a real new treat for those of us who kind of lost our ability to motor up the hills. And so I intend to use it to get to TAM board meetings and other board meetings. So look for me on the bike path. I'll be there. Okay. That's the report. Commissioner matters, not on the agenda. Any commissioner reports? Looking to my left, looking to my right. Okay, seeing none, we'll move right now to the executive director report.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Diane Steinhaus, your executive director. You have an executive director's report sent out Friday. It's in your supplemental packet at your seat. You also probably received it online. I want to just mention a couple of additional things. Please feel free to read the report. If you haven't, we'd be glad to answer any questions as you glance over it today. I do want to mention that we are publishing a newsletter now monthly called the TAM Traveler, which highlights the various activities we have. You should be receiving that electronically as well. Please share that. We share that with your city managers, public works, and planning directors. Please feel free to share that regarding the regular TAM activity. We did a summary of the federal infrastructure plan in the executive director's report, and then voila, we received some information this morning from our Paul Schlesinger from Washington on the release of the president's infrastructure plan. We can get into this in the future in a little more detail. Please be aware that it's going to build gleaming new roads, bridges, highways, and railways and waterways. So we'll be bringing some surface treatments to create gleaming roads to you in the future. That's a joke. There is an increase in state and local authority that's pledged, but there's also a recommendation that the federal DOT not dedicate as high a percentage of funding on projects, and maybe swap their traditional 88.53% down to 20%, and expect states and local agencies to fund the remainder. So stay tuned for more on that. As you know, and you will be hearing in the next couple of days, many states, including ours, have agreed to raise their own revenue. We did that last spring with SB1. And then, of course, our regional agency is looking at raising revenue through regional agency tolls. So stay tuned. I mean, this is a starting point for discussion. There's obviously a lot of debate as to where the revenue will come from, et cetera. Also in your report, I did want to point out a current, let's call it a summary report for the 2015 and 16 years as to our cities and towns permitting housing units. The reason we want to keep you up to speed on this, and it's a little table we have in here, we have more backup information I'd be glad to send, is that MTC is still looking at how can we condition transportation funding on housing production. So you can get a feel for who's producing what. We don't know if they'll look at the previous 2 RENA cycles or the current cycle. They're going to be talking about this over the next 5 months, so we'll be bringing reports back on that. We are also supporting, not in this report, county funding as a funding partner. We will be a funding partner to them, to the county, applying for a Caltrans adaptation grant to further study the Manzanita Highway 101 flooded area. You might have seen a blurb in the paper about that. That grant is due February 16th. We'll know in May if additional funds have come for addressing that, and we'd be glad to continue to support the county on that. We're working closely with them. They're developing scope and we're writing checks, so that's kind of how that's going. So stay tuned on that. You also have at your seats, and I'll just say a few things about that. Madam Chair, I think we might have some speakers on this item. The final letter that was sent out on February 7th, which would have been last Wednesday, by our ad hoc subcommittee of commissioners, Lucan, Phillips, Chair Moulton Peters, and Commissioner Connolly, who's also our MTC representative. This is the request letter to the area toll authority on exploring the upper deck and maybe lower deck of the Richmond-Sanderfeld Bridge for joint use by cyclists and vehicles. So this is asking for that to be explored further. So this is the letter that was sent, and I'd be glad to respond to any questions on this. This is the beginning of a process to explore this, not the end. So there's data that has to be collected, impacts that have to be analyzed, etc. So we're eager to work closely with the Contra Costa folks and data to take a further look at this. And again, I'd be glad to answer questions. We are continuing to receive comments on this through to me and through our website. I know many of you are receiving comments as well. If you would be willing to share those with TAM, with myself or Molly Graham, we're going to create a box on our website where folks can see all the comments as they come in that we have on this. So we have 3 most recently from the last couple days, and I'm sure we're going to have more, and I'm sure you have many as well. So some of you have shared some of those, particularly Supervisor Connolly, and we'd be glad to kind of capture those and package them and make them available for the public to review. So that's that concludes my report.
Okay, we'll open the questions from the board.
I very much like, probably many of you saw the Marine Voice column that I put together, was basically put together some ideas in the public at the last board meeting. But basically to have non-movable barriers separating the upper deck and lower deck lanes, which is kind of a lot cheaper to implement. And then you can run traffic for the bike pedestrian lane at different times, and basically by opening and closing the ends. Hopefully that'll get into the mix here as we go forward. It will be a cost-effective and also effective at keeping different options open during the commute time, which I think is essential for really to show what this pilot program could do.
Comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll open to the public now. Yeah, and we're a small room. I think you can just stand up in place and give your name and your comment. So, yes.
David Schoenbrunn, Transdev. I had thought from reading Mr. Prado's reporting on this that there was action proposed. Obviously not. But I wanted to come forward and put some context on this decision making. That the whole idea of having another lane on the westbound direction of the bridge is based in a conventional way of thinking about transportation. And that there's too many cars, we widen the road. End of story. This is what transportation engineers have been doing since they developed roads. But it's a faulty analysis because it assumes that solo driving is the natural order of life. And frankly, in the rest of the world, it isn't. So the problem here is sprawl. Too many people live in homes accessible only by cars, and therefore they assume that they have to get wherever they're going by driving alone. So the reason for congestion is too many solo drivers. It's that simple. A system dependent on solo driving is unsustainable. It will overwhelm existing facilities as the population grows. What's the solution? If there is one, is to put in place encouragement for sharing rides, for carpooling. An HOV lane would be a very different project on the westbound bridge than what's being talked about right this moment. Because HOV lanes deliver a consistent travel time advantage, and that means that people could take the Golden Gate bus from Marin to Contra Costa and have it actually be competitive with driving. 580 used to be an HOV lane freeway until MTC sandblasted the lines. The time is right to make this freeway consistent with the EIR in which it was approved. This is a freeway that needs a peak hour HOV lane. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. All right, you were next, and then yes, please. Yeah, and then I know I see Linda and the gentleman behind Bill.
Cindy Winter, here is today's AV report. Autonomous vehicle technology improves by the nanosecond, and they are on their way. The new question is, how will AVs affect our transportation patterns? The short answer is more congestion. At the Consumer Electronics Show last month, here's what Ford CEO Jim Hackett said in his keynote speech. Part of the promise of ride-hailing has been that it would reduce congestion in cities, but studies show the opposite is true. In May of last year, UC Davis issued a report about the coming AV era and concluded, by lowering the cost of travel in terms of time and money, automation will likely induce more travel. Yesterday's New York Times reports that for decades there had been about 13,000 taxis in the city. Now there are about 100,000 additional cars for hire, most of it Uber. Congestion in Manhattan is phenomenal. San Francisco has similar ride-hail troubles. Marin is not as urban, but population keeps growing in surrounding counties, nor will Marin be exempt from traffic added by empty AV ride-hail vehicles. Ford has a scheme to prevent this through the cloud. I don't know whether it will work. Which leads me to the Richmond Bridge. It grows ever more traffic clogged with no end in sight. Even now, it is proving difficult to finagle a space for cyclists, and I'm wondering whether the proposals are safe. On Golden Gate Bridge, the bike path is raised above the roadway with greater protection provided by a metal barrier at the curb. On the Richmond Bridge, the suggested movable barricades could be struck by a vehicle and shoved into a cyclist. In addition, the Richmond Bridge is subject to strong blasts of air from trucks and buses and from Mother Nature, which can cause cyclist fatalities. Has anyone considered a bike path cantilevered from one side of the bridge? Trying for a low cost, perhaps using partial prefabrication. It would be separate from scary trucks and buses and high-speed cars, and its walls could be designed to provide partial protection from the wind. With the growing use of electric bicycles and other small electric vehicles, a cantilevered path would probably be well used, and all the more so because users would feel, and in fact be, safer. Before any decision is made about bikes on the bridge, I think the board would benefit from the initial engineer's report, something simple on the pros and cons of a cantilevered path, if that has not already been done.
Thank you very much. We'll move now to this gentleman, and then to Linda in the back, and then back to you in the way back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Tim Gilbert, resident of San Rafael, and I've been commuting to Berkeley from my home in the west end of San Rafael for 28 years. That's 14,000 plus trips across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. My wife and I commute together, we carpool. We put our bikes in our car, we drive across the bridge, we park our car, we get on our bikes and we ride the short Bay Trail, lovely way to start the day and end the day, to our offices in Berkeley. I think there's a myth that who would do this? Why would you put a bike lane or a pedestrian lane on the bridge? Well, people don't really recognize. Number one, nobody has ever ridden a bike on that bridge or walked. And you know, it's all about getting across that bridge. If you're on a bike or walking, you see the water birds, you see the seals on the rocks, you notice the sky, the water, the pattern of the water. Biking and walking is a very different experience than riding a bike or riding a car. I also think that the advent of the electric bike is going to change not only the distance that we're willing to ride. My home is 17 miles from my office. That's not a long commute or bike ride. The electric bike is going to change that. It's going to change the way we go up hills or the distance we ride. It's going to change the demographics of who is comfortable riding a bike. So I think these factors need to be considered in your decision. So thank you so much for the process that we'll be going through to really evaluate this.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yes, please, Linda.
Passing out Google Map traffic tomorrow morning, a map. I just want to note, it takes 14 minutes to drive from a place in Richmond to Marin County. No traffic. I also want to add 36% of the commuters to jobs in Marin come from the East Bay, from Contra Costa County, Alameda, and this is from a study that you had presented to you a year ago in March. So this is TAM data. So over a third of the employees in Marin County commute in this traffic. You can see on the first map at 6:10 in the morning, the backup starts. An hour later, you can see how that backup is no longer 14 minutes, but maybe almost as much as an hour longer. It stays that way for 2 more hours in the morning. And it's not until 10:10, 4 hours of this backup, that the traffic goes back to before what it was at 6:10 in the morning. We spent a lot of effort in Marin County to help these folks get back home at the end of the day. The challenge is, how do they get here in the morning to work in our jobs? So I'm Linda Jackson. I'm speaking for the Aging Action Initiative. There are a lot of older people in Marin County that depend on caregivers. And to hire the best caregivers, to keep them, means helping them not sit in that horrible traffic in the morning to come to work and commuting to the greenhouse gas emissions that you see 4 hours of this backup. So I really appreciate, the word that I hope is in the letter is urgent, and I'm excited to hear your idea. I think there's creative solutions to this, just as there were the urgency to make that solution in the afternoon so people can go home back to their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, just a minute. The gentleman in the back with the black vest, and then we'll move to you, and then to you. Yes, please.
Greg Nell, President of Santa Fe City Schools. I just have one point. I'm not going to belabor the tremendous damage this congestion is costing our school district with regards to our buses and our employees. But I enjoyed spending that last meeting and listening to all the other speakers in favor of this test for a modal change. And I hadn't known this before, but they said that 4.5 bridges, I don't know which one's the half bridge, but 4.5 bridges already have this test underway right now. And I heard anecdotal testimony from the owner of an electric bike franchise that he thinks more people are using the Dunbarton Bridge. So the obvious question to me is, do we need this 5.5 test for a modal change on this Richmond Bridge? I think, where's the data showing that this is happening? We've already got 4 tests going on. Where's the data showing that it's working? Maybe not enough data has come in, and we should give those 4 tests a chance to evolve and develop the data to show that there is a modal change. Make this test a different test, one that involves a joint use lane, where we have automobile congestion relief for 4 hours, 5 days a week, bike traffic the rest of the time. And I just don't see why this is so important to the establishment of the data for the test that you guys are talking about doing when it's already happened on 4 of the bridges. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the gentleman in the blue, right here, that light blue, yes.
Me.
Medium blue, yep,
Yep,
please.
Roger Kirk, and local resident, drive a Leaf, have an electric bike that can't seem to get the electric part working on. And I work on the water. I've worked on the water for 40 years, going underneath the bridge on tugboats and ships. And the weather on there, the wind generally follows in the summertime. The hot valley air sucks in the cold air, which makes it extremely windy up there. And also, if you want to get an idea, just look at the Carquinez Bridge. They spent a lot of money putting up a pedestrian walkway there from a similar but much shorter span, less than a quarter mile wide. And I can count on 2 hands, possibly 1 hand, the amount of times I've seen even pedestrians on that span crossing between Vallejo and Crockett, which are both similar type areas, industrial and housing. I think that a electric type van that would park either right underneath the bridge at the Richmond Refinery side, underneath the underpass there, and one right at the Fishing Rod and Gun Club would be on call. If you had a phone, would give you an idea very cheaply of how many people are actually going to use this. I guarantee you, not a lot of people will. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, right there, gentlemen, and then Mr. Seiler after that.
Dwayne Price from Larchburg. For your last meeting, I had the flu, so I sent you a letter. I hope you read it, because it discusses a lot of issues, but there are 2 of them I'd like to emphasize right here. First, the safety for cyclists on this bridge. I've been riding bicycles for 70 years, and in places that would surprise you. One of those places is the shoulder of 4-lane 101 for about 75 miles from Cloverdale to Leggett. And yes, there's still a lot of heavy traffic there. The only time I felt uncomfortable or unsafe was when the shoulder pretty much disappeared and one section in which it was still 2 lanes. Otherwise, I was snug and smug. Also, some of you may know the bicycles are allowed on the Richardson Bay Bridge just out of Marin City. Well, I've cycled that many times while auto traffic passes me at 60 miles per hour without feeling endangered. The real problem there is the trash on the shoulder. A couple of other unprotected places that I've ridden is on Route 37 from Novato, Vallejo. Beautiful, nice, wide shoulder. And the Devil's Slide tunnels south of Pacifica, a real hoot. In the first of these 2 places, the shoulder is about 3 to 4 foot wide, or about 1/3 the width of a proposed lane on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. There's absolutely no need for a multi-million-dollar movable barrier. If you're still a bit worried, do what they've done up north. They have put these little narrow 6-inch rumble strips on the lane line. When I occasionally veered over there and hit that thing, I shook my teeth out. I still have them though. If an automobile driver hits those things, they will be rudely awakened. And there are other effective, though equally inexpensive ways to go about doing this. So, here's what we need to do for now. Let's open up that 3rd lane only, for idles only, at commute time, eastbound on the lower lane, westbound on the upper lane. The other 20+ hours per day, both of those lanes are available for bikes and peds. If Caltrans needs to occasionally shut down a lane for maintenance, which was their purported excuse for the movable barrier, if you may remember, The other lane is still available. And surely they're smart enough to not shut down the one available lane during commute period. Okay, second point. Yes, I know, but second point. The second thing I want to talk about is where's our vision? Sure, we might be able to temporarily lessen some of the pain here, but it will return. This has been our story for years now. You know, build it, and they will come, and they have. We need to get real here, folks, with real plans for efficient transit, and that's spelled Bay Area Rapid Transit. BART, from Richmond to San Rafael, with connections on Smart, Cloverdale, and to Tiburon. Yes, Tiburon. Sure, it will cost money. And yes, it will take years, which is why we must start now, today, February the 12th, 2018, to create a real vision and to seriously plan to fulfill it. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you. Did you want to speak, Patrick?
Hello, my name is Patrick Seiler from Transportation Alternatives from Marin. It's good to see all you here this afternoon. Pleasure. And thank you for all the consideration you've been giving to Richmond Bridge, and that's actually what I'd like to speak to as well. And I'd like to follow, Greg and I are good friends, and I think that, like I said, he makes compelling arguments. And I think, again, he's made a great compelling argument today, which is we need data and facts to base our decisions on. And so I urge you to look at this piece of paper that I've just passed around to you, which is entitled Increasing Highway Capacity Unlikely to Relieve Traffic Congestion. And this is all footnoted and dated, so you have all the information that you need. And it addresses it really clearly, but the thing I'd like you to keep in the back of your mind as you consider this is not the capacity of the freeway, but the future for your children and your grandchildren. Because as the seas are rising, they're not going to ask you, when you're sitting in traffic, they're going to ask you, what did you do about global warming? And as the federal government decided they're not going to follow up on it, it's incumbent upon us at local and state levels to know what's going on. And the greenhouse gases are being contributed by automobiles and traffic is approximately 40%. So here are the key findings. The quality of evidence linking highway capacity expansion to increased vehicle miles traveled. Increased vehicle miles traveled. Read that. More pollution is high. Increased roadway capacity induces vehicle miles traveled in the short run and even more in the long run. Capacity expansion leads to a net increase in vehicle miles traveled, not simply shifting vehicle miles traveled from one road to another. Increases in greenhouse gas emissions are attributable to capacity expansions are substantial. And then here's the one about the economic argument that was brought up by Linda Jackson, which is a really good one. And again, I think that the points that are being made are great about the access. As an employer, I look at those, but look at the one on the back page. Capacity expansion does not increase employment or other economic activity. These are studies. These are facts. This has been done. So those things are not going. You're not going to get mobility, and you're not going to get increased people coming to work by expanding the capacity of the Richmond Bridge. It's not going to happen. And all your studies that you've shown in every single one of your cases demonstrate that there's going to be nothing but more traffic on the roads, and the only way to alleviate it is through multimodal approach. And that's what all the information and all the statistics show. So anyway, I urge you to read the data and keep close track of it, and ask yourself, what is the question you're really trying to answer? And what are you going to tell your grandchildren that you were working on here that was most important? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. To the gentleman in the plaid who's been so patient.
Thank you. Bruce Ackerman. I'm a member of the Fairfax Town Council, but I'm speaking as an individual. I wanted to say to support the possibility that Commissioner Reed has raised, which is the fixed barriers on both decks, to split it into 2 lanes that would always be available for traffic and 1 lane that would be available for traffic during peak hours in that direction, but open for bicycles and pedestrians during the non-peak hours. The congestion is obviously a severe issue. I would agree with the previous speaker that if the congestion won't be permanently relieved or even relieved for very long by adding more lanes, but under the political pressure that I understand you're all under, I think that's probably what you're going to end up needing to address. And I think this is a good way to address it. It would be more cost-effective than a movable barrier, safer than a movable barrier in the sense both of the possibility of a movable barrier being knocked over and the congestion and safety issues while the movable barrier is being moved, which is fairly significant. The bicyclists, to the extent that they're, and I am a bicyclist, ride an electric bike, that we're buffeted by winds, that would be much safer if we have the barriers to protect us. And the transportation, I see this as being a good alternative to look at future movement toward transitions to transportation as a service and increased transit, which I think are going to happen regardless, and I hope we can move them as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible because of the greenhouse gas implications of what we're doing now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Jim Garrity, I don't think you're gonna find a solution with this body here, because the solution of adding a third lane is basically a political thing. But in your other jobs on the town council and the county seats, you can create housing. Because right now they have an imbalance of jobs in Marin County and housing in Marin County. So a long-range solution is to create more affordable housing for the low workers that are coming in here. The lanes aren't gonna change that. We've heard about the congestion, we've heard the reports, the data's out there. Adding more capacity is only gonna bring more cars onto the surface roads, which are already clogged. So go to your other jobs and solve this problem with the housing that's needed in Marin County.
Thank you. Was there one other speaker? Yes, please, right here, the lady at the corner and then in the back.
My name's Diana Perdue, I live in Fairfax, and as a commuter, I cross the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge 4 times a week, and I have for more than 40 years. There are now massive traffic jams that extend to 101 in Corte Madera and north to central San Rafael. It's unfathomable to me that 3 lanes, both east and west, are not up and running for cars. All of your multi-agency meetings and monumental amounts of tax dollars earmarked on this bike lane, I feel is misguided. It seems that a prudent and far-sighted design would be to strike each of the decks in 3 lanes and let the cars roll. Automobiles pay registration fees, gas tax, and tolls to run the bridge and should have priority in a situation of gridlock such as we have now on this bridge. The entertainment of riding a bicycle over the bridge should not take precedence over automobiles. To really help the bicycle commuter, put more bike-carrying attachments on the buses that run that route and expand those routes. I'd like you to add this to your formula. Should you segregate the 3rd lanes? And the only idea I've heard that I could maybe support is the fixed barrier that John Reed has brought forward. It seems sensible. It seems as though it could work if you're going to put 1 lane out of commission, although I would prefer 3 each way. But remember that if you have a segregated 3rd lane and a car breaks down, you are at 1 lane crossing that bridge, which could be catastrophic on, well, if I'm in that traffic, I would never want to see that happen. And you may not know this, but pretty much every day, the road drivers are already using the 3rd lane to cross the bridge. Thank you.
Thank you. And there was another speaker in the back. Oh, hello, Cynthia.
Hello.
Yes.
Cynthia Murray, North Bay Leadership Council. We represent the leading employers in Marin, Sonoma, and Napa counties, and I'm here today to encourage you to consider supporting having the lane used for commuters. We have several things happening at the same time. We are seeing a tremendous increase in the inability to fill jobs. Marin County has very low unemployment. Sonoma County has low employment. We've just had many workers displaced in Sonoma County from the loss of the homes and the fires. and we need to be able to attract and retain workers. If we don't figure out how to improve our commute times, we are putting our region as an economic disadvantage. We are not competitive with other regions because of the tremendous amount of time that's going into the commute. And that also ties into what Mr. Garrity said about housing. We also have a crisis in housing, and we have that been exacerbated by the loss in Sonoma County, but Marin has been underbuilding its needed housing for a long time. It is essential that we also look at what we can do on housing, but in the meantime, at least we can try and improve the commute times while we work in that problem. And what we're hopeful of is that the predictions are right on the adoption of electric vehicles, which will also help in the reduction of the greenhouse gases. And I would caution to be careful when we have studies quoted, because we've all seen there's numerous studies with numerous methodologies, and one study doesn't prove that it is the absolute way that we should be going. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, any other? Yes, please.
Hi, Jean Severnhouse. Thank you all for listening. I was privileged to hear Bata give a presentation about the bike lane and why they were excited about it. I know they haven't really spoken up to the county politically, and I think that's a problem. But the reason they were excited is they said, we're incredibly depressed. Every time we build a new bridge or new lanes on the bridge, they fill up with traffic and stop. That's what happens in the Bay Area. You build a new bridge for cars, it fills up with cars and it stops. So we're thrilled to offer this pilot project for 4 years that would allow bicycles as a mode shift. So they're looking at those 4 commute hours to take people out of cars and into bikes. This is not a recreational toy. This is actually a working commute shift. So if that's the issue that Bata is told to address, would TAM be willing to address starting ferry service to provide mode shift? People can easily ride their bikes to the ferry on either side and to their jobs, and run ferries during those 4 hours. With, for example, from the Bay Trail at Point Isabel to Shoreline. So I think it would be good to add that idea to the mix. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Are there any further speakers? I see 2 more. Yes, gentleman from Belvedere.
Ken Johnson from Belvedere. Our Belvedere representative couldn't come today because the city council was having a closed session. But as a former mayor, he asked me to appear and make sure that everything went the right way, quote unquote. I'm in support of the February 7th letter that was handed out at the meeting today, and I hope you'll continue in that direction. But I'd also like to just comment, with all due respect to the UC Davis printout here. As a graduate of UC Davis, I was a little bit amazed. If you look on the back page, it talks about capacity expansion. Well, we're dealing with a problem here with existing traffic. We're not dealing with expansion. And the second point, I think is kind of incorrectly stated. If you look at the footnote, which is 13, that supports the conclusion, it's really not applicable here. I'm very familiar with what happened in San Francisco and Octavia, and practiced law in that area for 35 years. And there was a very big social change and benefit when an earthquake caused the freeway to come down. But that's not our situation here. We have a bridge. And so that footnote doesn't support the conclusions here, existing transporting people from one geographical area to another through a very long bridge. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
Daniel Meltzer. Just a few remarks. I'm glad to see you all here at this somewhat hastily organized and poorly noticed public meeting. I'm disappointed that we didn't get more opportunity to get the word out, although I'm glad to see everyone here. Let's talk about facts. This body doesn't have the ability to stop the bike lane project. It's already budgeted, approved, and scheduled. Supervisor Connolly, as a member of the MTC, does have more influence than all the rest of you put together. I would hope he would respond to the general consensus on the board, to not go off on his own. When I talked to MTC, they seemed to indicate that that was in fact happening. Let's be clear, we want reasonable solutions here. The traffic is a problem, commute patterns are a problem, housing is a problem, and we're going to have to find innovative solutions to address those problems. And I would suggest to you that a lot of the answers that you're seeking are in the 366-page I-580 approval document published in August of 2016. That was only, 16 months ago. I don't buy the argument that everything has changed so much that we just have to throw all that detailed documentation out. And it does include very specific information on the zippering process and how that lane would be shared. Now, if you can create a safe traffic lane there and provide some sort of reasonable bicycle access during the time it was zippered over, by all means do that. But there's a lot of information out there already, very detailed documentation. And frankly, on January 25th, I didn't hear much in the way of even a passing familiarity with those existing studies. So if your agenda is to create a reasonable solution, then by all means. If your agenda is to stop the bike lane dead in its tracks and prevent any kind of mode share and go further into a car-only commute pattern, then we need to address that head on and confront whoever is advocating for that, because that will not work. Now, let's be reasonable. Let's look at the facts. If you can share it safely for motorists and for cyclists, fine, provide some alternatives. If you can't, let's not get in the way by demanding yet more studies at considerable expense. Let's, give it a try. Now, if you do want to study the issue, go ahead with the program as budgeted, approved, and permitted, and you can try it out at a certain time. There's nothing going to really prevent that from happening. Another thing you could test out is what would you like to get rid of the toll plaza, and you could do that rather easily by saying, okay, 4 hours, no toll, let the traffic flow down to 2 lanes. That would approximate what the electronic tolling will be like. So consider that also,
Yeah.
please, in your deliberations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to close public comment on this and thank everyone for their comments. I think we've heard the full array of interests and issues, and I will say that a number of us have been talking about the fact that we are very aware of the current traffic congestion. We are also very aware that we're in a time of transition in transportation modes. It's clear that the past is probably not going to look like the future.
But that transition may need to come over some time rather than all at once. I also want to acknowledge the last speaker. I think we do want to have the current data. That is what we asked for in our letter, to have the current information. Some of the studies are several years old and were done during the time of the recession, and I think it's important to get an update on those. So this will come to the Bay Area Tolling Authority and MTC for discussion. We have sent this letter to weigh in on it, and I will defer. Damon, are there any other comments you'd like to make or anything you'd like to add, or that it's coming back to us in the future?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And thank you, everyone, for coming out to speak. We really appreciate your input. Just to make it clear for everyone, this really was not an agenda item per se today. It was part of our executive director's report. That having been said, this is a key issue that the public has been weighing in on. I've received personally dozens of emails and letters from folks, phone calls. This board did take the issue up, and I believe that our letter dated February 7, 2018 does reflect the consensus and sentiments of this board. As was noted, I'm the MTC rep for the county and the cities and towns in Marin. And I felt it was important to have this conversation. When this issue came up at MTC, and most recently, that was basically just to approve the contract. This item is going forward, as was noted. It's now out with a contract to a construction firm. That having been said, I was hearing loud and clear from constituents locally. Number one, it's a big price tag for the infrastructure that we're adding. And number two, there is a tremendous amount of congestion right now on the Richmond Bridge that is having real world impacts on our residents, on workers making the commute in and out of Marin. So I thought it was important to bring the issue up and really ask for flexibility in approach in light of the changed conditions we've seen over the last 5 years, in particular with the level of congestion that's occurring. So the vision really is of a shared use. Someone tried to posit the notion that this is really a decision exclusively between bicycles and solo drivers. That's not what we're talking about here. We all get that we have to provide folks with different alternatives and opportunities. So as part of my ask to MTC to explore this issue going forward, and they've agreed to do so, and that's why I think it's very important that folks continue to weigh in on this. It really is looking at ways we can ease congestion. That could include improving transit across this corridor. It could be incentivizing carpools, as well as the modes that we've been talking about today. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Again, I think it's an important conversation to have. I'm glad we're having it. And I look forward to continuing to receive everyone's input as the issue goes forward at MTC. We're expecting to get a scope from MTC staff on what that exploration or study would look like and what it would involve. And I think the time to move on this is right now, given the circumstances.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to conclude this item now, and I'm going to ask the board if you would allow me to make a change on the agenda. Our consultant available to talk about the sales tax results is available until 4:45.
With your permission, I'd like to move item 6 up and take that up right now, and then we'll go back and move to commissioner reports and public open time.
Do you need a motion?
I would like a motion.
I'll move the
Okay.
change.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We'll move to item 6 now.
Thank you. Let me introduce this item. I think we have on the phone, looking around to confirm with staff, our representative from Godby Associates. They apologize that they were not able to be here in person today, but you should have at your seats in your supplemental packet 2 items that we'll be presenting. One is the PowerPoint that Charles Hester from Godby Associates will be going through that illustrates the results from our January poll of likely November 2018 voters on the potential for our draft expenditure plan for extension of the sales tax. The second is the top line report, which the pollster produces. This is a typical product, which again gives you the questions and the results associated with that polling effort. So this is an information item only. We wanted to present this and answer any questions that you may have at this time. I'm going to turn this over to Charles Hester. Are you on the line, Charles?
I am. I'm here.
Great. Then I'm just going to turn this over to you, Charles, to start running through our presentation. Charles Hester with
Great.
Godby
Is the
Research.
presentation up? Can you guys all see the cover page?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm Charles Hester. I'm Vice President of Godby.
Louder, please.
Speak really loud.
I'm standing in for Brian Godby today, who had his knee replaced this
Charles.
morning and is doing great. Thank you very
Is
much
it
for the
as high as
opportunity
it'll go?
to make this presentation and still allow me to make another meeting on the peninsula this afternoon.
Charles, can you really boom your voice as loud as you can?
I am trying as best I can. I'm speaking as loud
That's
as I can.
good.
The phone right up to my face. I can barely read the presentation, but yes, I will do my best to speak as loud as possible.
Yeah, Charles, we have all of our 16 board members as well as about 30 to 40 people in the audience, so as loud as you can on the presentation, thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. So the first slide talks a little bit about the overview and research objectives for the survey that we conducted for the Transportation Authority of Marin. They commissioned us to conduct a survey of local voters with several research objectives, including the following: gauging the public perception on the overall quality of life in the county of Marin, assessing voter support for a potential future sales tax measure to address transportation needs specifically in Marin County with funding that cannot be taken away by the state, prioritizing projects and programs that could be funded by the proceeds from the potential tax measure, assessing the influence of supporting and opposing statements on potential voter support, understanding community behavior of voters within our survey frame, and identifying any differences in voter support due to demographic and or voter behavioral characteristics. The next slide is a little bit about the methodology. Our industry has changed a lot over the past several years. In the mid-2000s, we started including cell phones because landline was dying. Now cell phones can be dying, and it's more of an issue of a proprietary phone, right? Like you had a landline at one point, a cell phone, your landline was your AOL account, you gave that out to folks that you didn't really want to talk to, like survey researchers such as myself. And your cell phone was your device that you would answer if you just recognized the prefix or the area code. But now that people are jettisoning landlines and cell phones are becoming much more private, so if a name doesn't pop up with a number, even though it's your area code and perhaps even has a prefix, people are not answering their phones. So in the mid-2010s, we started introducing an online version of our survey with an email invitation, and we've recently added a text invitation, and this has been great. It's allowed us to increase our sample size over our goals and projections, which we'll see in a second, but more importantly, it's allowed us to be more inclusive with our approach, because different people like different mechanisms. Some folks still like their landline, some folks will still answer their cell phones, and folks like to do things on the internet while they're commuting or perhaps at home at night. So email and text allow us to capture data from a variety of folks while still having that accuracy and precision that we've had for the past 28 years as a firm. Our universe for this survey was the roughly 125,000 likely voters in the county of Marin. Our fielding dates were January 17th to January 23rd of this year. The average interview length was 18 minutes. And we collected 794 interviews where we had a goal of 600 interviews. And this is where our approach to collecting data and being as inclusive as possible really helps out. We collected almost 200 more interviews than our stated goal, which allowed us to lower the margin of error from a survey of 6% to a survey of 600 from 4% to roughly 3.5% at the 95% confidence level. It says 3.47 here, and I'm just going to round that up for moving through the rest of the slides. The next couple of slides go through the survey questions and live questions under our key findings by survey questions. The first question in the survey has to do with overall quality of life, perception of quality of life at Marin County. And we tend to aggregate satisfied and dissatisfied. So if we aggregate satisfied and look at very satisfied versus somewhat satisfied, you see that we're at 90% and change, so 90.3%. This is a slight decrease from 2017. We asked a similar question in another survey for TAM. And with our margin of error, we are just a little bit outside of this. We're 3.7% difference as opposed to a 3.5 margin of error. So we're down slightly, but still very high, with 9 out of 10 voters indicating that they are either very or somewhat satisfied with the quality of life in Marin County. This is also not atypical of what we see in other Bay Area regions, and we're sort of a victim of a booming economy and what goes along with that. We'll talk about that in the next slide. Next slide has to do with satisfaction with transportation in Marin County. And you can see that 2017, again, aggregating satisfied, very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, we were at 54.5%. We dropped a little bit to 47.7%, but unlike question one, we're slightly outside of the margin of error, 3.5% margin of error. Here, we are at a delta of 2.8%. So we're within that margin of error, but again, it does speak a little bit to longer commute times and those issues that come with the moving economy, which have a little bit of an impact on satisfaction and quality of life for residents. The next question in the survey has to do with the uninformed support for a half-cent sales tax. And I mean uninformed in that we have not given the voters any other information other than the ballot question within the sales tax measures. So we have about quality of life, transportation is really, don't really have anything to do with the sales tax measure in terms of where money would go and tax rates and things like that. So this is giving the vanilla version of the ballot question as best we can come up with, and sort of replicate a voter that goes into the ballot box on election day or perhaps picks up their absentee ballot and just reads the ballot question. Doesn't read the pamphlet, doesn't read any direct mail, doesn't read arguments for and against, just sort of reads the ballot question. As you can see, if we can aggregate again support by yes and no, we're at 77.9%, so about 78% for the ballot question in order to relieve traffic congestion on Highway 101 and local roads, fix potholes and maintain local roads, improve interchanges and access on and off Highway 101, expand safe routes to schools, including school bus service, relieving local congestion, and provide local transit, including options for seniors and persons with disabilities. Charlotte County, Marin, extending half-cent voter-approved sales tax without increasing the tax rate, providing $25 million annually for 30 years with citizens' oversight of taxes taken away by the state. So at 78%, and again with a 3.5% margin of error, this could be as high as 81.4 or as low as 74.4, but given the two-thirds or 66.7% support needed to pass the two-thirds measure, this is a great place to start. And we did a survey in 2017, but we looked at a 3/4 cent rate here. So if you look down at the box on the lower left corner, it shows initial support or uninformed support at about 61% versus the 78% now. And that can be attributed to be looking at a half-cent sales tax measure versus the 3/4 cent sales tax measure we looked at in the 2017 survey. And I know it's an initial November 2018 on the right there in that box, but those are initial voters for November 2018. The survey was conducted in 2017, but this is the same universe of likely November 2018 voters. So we're much higher than 2017, but again, it's due to tax rate of being a half-cent versus a 1/4 cent. The next slide talks about the features of the measure. We want to provide this information in mean score formatting as opposed to percentage formatting. And the reason for this is if we look at the somewhat more likely and the much more likely, and let's say we just group those together, somebody that has a 75% aggregate and it's 25% somewhat more likely and 50% much more likely is a lot different than the same 75% support where it is 50% somewhat more likely and 25% much more likely, even though that they have the same percentage added up in their aggregates together. So the mean score formatting sort of takes the strength of the features in addition to the raw percentages, but we do include those there, and we can see that anything in the tier 1 and tier 2, which is this portion of the features that we tested. There's a second slide that I'll show you in a moment. Each one of these is above the 66.7% threshold needed. So these are all great features and good messages, and where voters would expect the proceeds of the sales tax measure, expect those proceeds to be spent. And then looking at the legend for the mean score formatting, just so I can go through this really quickly, -2 is much less likely to support the measure, -1 is somewhat less likely to support the measure, 0 is neutral, 1 is somewhat more likely to support the measure, and 2 is much more likely to support the measure. So we can see here with each of these tier 1 and 2 tier measures, they're approaching somewhat more likely to approach to support the measure and exceeding somewhat more likely and moving into the much more likely to support the measure. Again, these are all two-thirds measures, two-thirds features in terms of voter support, which is great. In looking at the specifics of these in terms of relieving traffic congestion on Highway 101.
Charles, you don't need to read these, Charles, for the sake of time.
And better timing, providing matching funds, facilitating direct connections from Highway 101 to 580. Moving down here, there's a theme of congestion, potholes, that we're seeing within the features. In looking at this from one last perspective, we asked some of these same questions in 2017 as well as 2018, and some have gone up slightly. The ones in green are from 2017 and the ones in red are from 2018, and some of them gone down slightly, but not statistically significant. We don't see a 0.2 in means for formatting change between any of these. So these are right on from 2017, and again, so these have increased and decreased a little bit, but they're really in sort of the same format, in the same order that they were in the 2017.
Hey, Charles, Charles, this is Diane. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
For the sake of time, maybe you can not read the individual items going forward and just kind of give us some general tiering and perspective. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So the next slide is the Tier 3 and Tier 4 measures, and one Tier 5 measure. So again, I'm not going to read these, but the important thing is while these are below 2/3, they're all above 50%. So, they're important, and they're probably important to TAM and the people in the room in terms of the expenditure plan and ballot resolution. But it would be our recommendation to focus on the Tier 1 features, the Tier 1 items for outreach and messaging. Again, there's no delta that's greater than 0.2, so these are all roughly the same as they were in 2017 with our initial survey for TAM. Question 5 in the survey, question 6, and I'll go through later, will rotate. And question 5 is informational statements, and question 6 is potential opposition statement. So what do? We're taking these in a more advocacy phase for the positive statements, and the negative statements are things that we might hear during the campaign or things that we hear in other communities that are looking at transportation sales tax measures. We rotate question 5 and 6 to hopefully minimize the impact on the second ballot question by not having all the positive ones before the last ballot question and all the negative ones. So we sort of rotate this to account for position bias, as well as rotating the items within the questionnaire so that A isn't always first and say J or H isn't always last. So looking at this, we see a similar pattern from features of the measure. Again, congestion, potholes, and connectivity are important, but so are taxpayer accountability propositions or provisions of the survey, as we can see in item C and item N and other items here within this. So these are good numbers. We're all above somewhat more likely, at least in this Tier 1, approaching much more likely, so these are impactful statements. The next slide is the influence of informational statements in Tier 2, and the top two here are still above a 2/3 threshold. So 66.7 for items 1 and 2. We dropped below the 2/3 threshold for the last items, but again, in terms of informational statements or of, let's say, advocacy, where the features are a little bit more vanilla than these things are. These are all very positive. Everything is above no effect to approaching someone more likely, but these would be sort of Tier 2 and 1 Tier 3 statements, and we would focus on the Tier 1 statements. And F and K are also important, again, because they're above the 2/3 level in terms of voter support. The next question has to do with potential opposition statements, and the first thing I can say about this is they're much less impactful than either the influential statements or the features of the measure, but they still have some impact. There's nothing that's right at somewhat more likely, but there's several that are approaching somewhat more likely. The other thing I think I would say about this, well, let me go back to the impactfulness. If we look at just the raw percentage here, the most impactful negative statements is 56%. So that's above half. So that's something to sort of, I wouldn't say be concerned about, but something to be mindful of. Where the positive statements were at 76% and the features were at 80% in terms of support, the degree score formatting. So this is good from the context of they're not as impactful, but still something to be mindful of, as many of these are still above 50%. As you can see, some of these are taxpayer accountability provisions at the state level. Some of these are things that are specific to TAM in Marin County, and at least one of these is for looking at other potential agencies that could be on the ballot sometime in the near future. And I guess the great takeaway here is that, of those other agencies that are considering potential revenue measures for 18 and 20 or sometime in the future, the fact that these aren't seen as more important than transportation needs is a really good thing for TAM as well, in terms of not having multiple measures on the ballot at the same time. So we tested uninformed support, we tested the features of the measure or where the money can be spent, we've tested positive statements, and we've tested negative statements. So what we've done here is sort of simulated a campaign. So we've got the voters that will just walk in to the polling place and cast a ballot, or perhaps a ballot and vote on it. And now we've got voters that will read everything. They will read the features, they will read positive and negative direct mail, perhaps look at editorials, endorsements, and things like that. And we've done the initial ballot test and the second ballot test. The second ballot test, I'm not going to read it again, is the exact same wording as the first ballot test. We're looking for the change here. And while we have decreased by 4.7%, which is a little bit over the margin of error at 3.5%, if we look at the maximum negative with that 3.5% margin of error and subtract that from the final test of 73.2%, you're still at 68.5%, which is still a good position to be in for a two-thirds measure looking at the number in 2018. So one of the things that we pulled out of the demographic questions, because this often gets asked to us about transportation factors, is who are you talking to? Are these people that commute, whether that's to work or school, via public transportation? Are you talking to all the bike and ped folks? Who are you talking to? So we pulled this out for a lot of our clients, and we have done this year. One, it tracks from 2017, and two, it indicates that almost 60% of voters indicate that they drive a car or truck alone. Work from home is second at 15%, and then we've got public transit, carpool, vanpool, bike and ped, motorcycle or scooter, other, and don't know or didn't have an answer for us within the survey. So we're talking, this is self-reported behavior, and I have no indication to believe that people are lying to us saying that they drive more when they actually take public transit or carpool or walk. So this is the folks that drive 101 or perhaps through the streets every day among the voting electorate. The last couple slides are summary and recommendations, and I won't go through this ad nauseum, other than to say that support was revealed that there was a solid base of support for November of 2018 for a half-cent sales tax measure, as just under 78%, and just over 73% after we read statements both support and opposition to the measure. One note should be that we tested not here. It's more than we typically test. That may have had the impact on voters. It could be that we had a lot of features within this as well that we tested that may have decreased voter support, and thus voters are looking for a more defined plan as well as focusing on their priorities of congestion, potholes, and connectivity with the taxpayer accountability provisions that we saw in the positive argument. This is great. You're certainly above the margin of error. This is a good place to be for several months before the election cycle and several months before the measure would have to be put on the ballot. I think the only caveat that we would have is if you look at the features of the measure, it suggests that at least among the voters that we talk to, there are higher priorities than the third or fourth bullets within the ballot question that we presented to voters. Again, these are still important things for a transportation sales tax measure to fund, but perhaps if these are more for the ballot resolution, perhaps not for the ballot question. Next slide is just informational, the most important things. Again, in terms of the advocacy statement, both positive ones we focus on here, on congestion, taxpayer accountability, potholes and fixing roads, and connectivity between freeways and connectivity between local roads and freeways that serve Marin County. Based on the information that we gleaned from the survey and our analysis, and the 2/3 majority required or supermajority required for approval, we recommend that the Transportation Authority of Marin continue the process preparing for a November 18th sales tax measure by conducting a comprehensive public education and outreach campaign to explain the transportation needs in Marin County to voters and the solutions that TAM has to solve those needs. By focusing on the priorities that we outlined in the survey, hopefully this will help solidify some of the soft support, so those likely voters, right, that would likely be likely to support the measure or likely to vote yes, so the definitely yes, and we'd like to see ideally a portion of those likely not to support the measure to become likely supporters or perhaps firm supporters of the definitely yes, which would also be a goal of a public education outreach campaign to voters. And that's what I have today for the presentation. I'm more than welcome to answer any questions and hope I got through this in the time allowed, and I hope that everybody can hear me.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Are there any questions from the board at this point in time?
Just, Madam Chair, just let me mention, this is just a, no action, this is a, just a discussion presentation. We'll be back after input from the cities and towns. That's the next step in the process. I'm already on probably half of your council agendas, working with your city managers to talk in the late February, March, April time period. I hope to come back with more detail on what I heard. I can do a status report in March, but a final report in April. And we can obviously continue to look at the poll, and we'll be presenting this to your councils as well in terms of a summary of what we learned in the poll and what people believe is important. So that's our plan next step.
I don't think you have an answer, but how might what we're hearing today regarding federal funding of transportation projects impact what's going on?
I don't have an answer to that. I think part of the difficulty is a shift in federal responsibility. Does that equal a need to continue with state, regional, and local funding? We haven't seen an increase in federal funding since 1993. We've all kind of gotten used to not relying on federal funding. It's about $2 million a year for us. I don't know if that'll go up. It seems like it might go down. So I don't.
My question is if that for some reason were taken away, would the need to do the conditions under which this goes forward change?
That is something that we might want to test in terms of public discourse, but I don't have an exact answer on that.
Yeah, so I'm just going back to Q4, and I'm focusing on Tier 3 and Tier 4, and I would really encourage you, Diane and the rest of the board, to really think about, I see the conversation over school bus service and crossing guards, and that is a really hot topic among the parents of the Ross Valley School District. And I say that while I'm from San Anselmo, we cover San Anselmo and Fairfax, and I sort of interact with a bunch of those parents. My daughter's involved in a lot of sports, and I've been to a lot of meetings. I've been to the Superintendent's Council and whatnot, and I have to say, so I'm sure Godby's a really talented firm and whatnot, but the parents that I've talked to, and I've talked to a bunch during the campaign, they don't really follow the dollars. They don't understand that the relationship is between TAM and the crossing guard. And I have to say, I find that it's Tier 4, because when I talk to parents, they say, you mean to tell me crossing guards, that's the most important thing in their life. So I have a 7-year-old daughter in 2nd grade, so there's no way she's on Tier 4. And I say this not as a parent, who has a crossing guard at my school. Like, I walk my daughter to school, so Wade Thomas doesn't have a crossing guard. So I'm conveying to you the community about what's going on. So I think that this is an issue. And if TAM wants to go out into the community and make a compelling case, this is something that we need to address and get ahead of and have some communication and understanding around this. And I know it's early in the process, but November is really not that far away. Sorry.
Yes, please, Diane.
I would like to echo what Brian is saying. I was at a Safe Routes to School task force meeting last week, and the crossing guards is a really hot topic. So while it doesn't seem to hold really well for the general population, when you get to targeted groups, it's going to be key to inform them, educate them about how funding works for their particular needs. And parents are a really key group. So I would highly recommend an educational effort in that respect.
Right. And Diane, a thought I had when Brian brought this up at our last meeting is to make sure that we reach out to the school superintendents and invite them to the town and city council meetings to be a part of that discussion and make those connections. Yes, Alice,
Yes,
please.
and just to add to the conversation, if there is regional funding available, many of the school boards feel that their money should be going to education, not to crossing guards, and so they're going to be looking to the individual cities to cough it up from their general funds, and that's hard for some of us.
Okay, come to other questions or comments before we, yes, Katie.
Just a general comment on the, it was pretty strong polling results, but again, even though it is from a universe of likely voters, it's a subset of that universe of folks who are willing to spend the 18 minutes or whatever it is to actually do it. And so I would say, to the point around family parent community, they're probably a less likely person to respond to this survey, just given the time. So I do think that broader picture, I think this does tell us a lot about what folks are concerned around, but it doesn't tell us necessarily everything. And so all of those elements that are part of our expenditure plan are probably important to someone.
Okay, if there are no other comments, this is a discussion item, but I will take some public comment if there is any. Mr. Schoenbrunn?
If this language, relieve traffic congestion on Highway 101 and local roads, shows up in the ballot statement, I'm going to be very sorely tempted to run a campaign against this measure. The reason for that is the public needs to have an adult conversation about congestion. I had this discussion with Supervisor Murray back at the time of Measure A, and she was insistent that the measure had to say relieve traffic congestion. I'm sorry she left. She was insistent on that and hasn't changed that position since then. I myself have grown and learned a lot since then. I've come to the conclusion that the statement relieve traffic congestion is a fantasy and, even worse, a fraud by public agencies on the public and on taxpayers. I am currently part of a coalition that is opposing Regional Measure 3 because it's trying to go in a status quo direction that has no long-term viability. The very concept, relieve traffic congestion, has no long-term meaning. This is a purely short-term focused notion that is extremely destructive of public decision-making. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no one else, we'll close public comment. Thank you for the update. Charles, thank you for the report.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you very much, Charles. Chair, would you like Yeah, we'll go now back to item number 4 and have some brief commissioner reports. Damon, we'll start with you, NCC reports.
Sure, just to note, speaking of Regional Measure 3, tomorrow at the Board of Supervisors, we will be considering the ministerial act of placing Regional Measure 3 on the June 2018 ballot for Marin County. Each of the 9 counties in the Bay Area will be doing a similar act through their Board of Supervisors. So again, just as a reminder, all the residents or voters of the 9-county Bay Area will have an opportunity to vote on Regional Measure 3 the first Tuesday in June. And that measure, in order to be enacted, will have to achieve at least 50% plus 1 majority cumulatively. So not per county, but collectively throughout the 9-county Bay Area.
Great, thank you. Marine Transit report, Commissioner Rice.
If we have a report. Nothing.
Okay, we didn't have a meeting this month.
Yeah.
Smart report, Commissioner
We
Rice.
didn't either.
Okay, well that
Takes care of that.
takes care of that. We'll go now to public open time for anything not on today's agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to address the group on anything not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the North-South Greenway discussion, item number 7.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Bill Whitney is the project manager for our series of projects in the Fort Larkspur area. We're going to be doing a very short presentation that kind of describes what it is that we have before you here today, and you have a staff memo with a lot of detail. We'll be kind of elaborating or concisely presenting the information in the staff memo with some additional items that I want to bring to your attention. So we have a series of projects that have been built since I'd say 2004, 5, so over the past 12, 13 years. It constitute what has often been described as the North-South Greenway, which is a bike pedestrian system of facilities connected, running along the Highway 101 corridor in Marin. Here's 3 projects that have been funded and built. This has been in cooperation with the cities, with the projects Lion, as well as TAM and the County of Marin. The Forest Swallow Hill multi-use path that was part of the sales tax measure passed by voters in 2004. The Cow Park Hill tunnel rehabilitation and multi-use path, where the tunnel was opened up for SMART, as well as for including a bike ped path. It was part of Regional Measure 2, subject of a T grant, and also the non-motorized transportation pilot program managed by the county between roughly 2005 and 2012. The Central Run Ferry Connector, similarly in RM2, approved by voters, as well as receiving non-motorized funds and some TAM competitive grant funds. So we have a couple of projects, though, in the North-South Greenway that we've been working on. Here they are: the North-South Greenway gap closure in Larkspur, Cordillera, and the San Rafael multi-zone, which is a subject of our discussion here today. The North-South Greenway down in Port Madeira is divided into 2 segments. A northern segment, which runs along Redwood Highway and involves the bridge over Port Madeira Creek and widening out that bridge, which is currently a 30-inch wide pathway. And then a southern segment, which goes from Warnham out on the levee that was the subject of some negotiating and successful cooperation with SMART to use the SMART right-of-way temporarily out on the levee to build the southern segment of the North-South Greenway. Now, there's another piece that we aren't talking about in a lot of detail, but we're working closely with the city of Larkspur, and that is to make sure we have quality bike ped facilities all along Redwood Highway from Warnham up to the creek. So there is a gap there. If you drive over there by Cost Plus Plaza, you'll see some Class 2 bike path. There is a gap, and we want to work closely with Larkspur and encourage them to sponsor a project there. They tentatively agreed to that. And that'll be like an ancillary piece of this package down in the Larkspur Corridor area. The northern segment is completing its design. We've been working with resource agencies to get permits. We are working with Caltrans. It's a Caltrans bridge over the creek that the path will lie on. And we should be all wrapped up and ready to go in June to construct that, with construction probably starting in the fall. The southern segment, which is the path out on the levee, is in the environmental phase. And that's going to continue for the next year or year and a half, roughly. Let's talk for a minute about the multi-use path. I would like to welcome Bill Guerin, who I believe is right there. The City of San Rafael is sponsoring a multi-use path project between 2nd Street and Anderson Drive. The city adopted an environmental clearance on this project back on December 4th. They are completing design and updating project costs. They've applied for permits. San Rafael is negotiating with SMART to build this path at the same time the rail construction is going on. That's probably the biggest reason we're here today, and we're seeking to do something we don't usually do. We're going to move funds from a project here to a project there. So the second to Anderson multi-use path project, I'm going to jump ahead here, is a $4.5 million project. We've cobbled together some funds, and the recommendation before you here today is to move funds from the north-south greenway over to the multi-use path in San Rafael temporarily, in order to make that project funded and be able to build it with the SMART line that's under construction now. The problem with that segment of Anderson Pathway is it's so close to the SMART rail, especially from Rice to Anderson, that if SMART was to build the operating rail line and start to operate rail service, then this path would have to be constructed from the rail line itself. You would need rail-mounted equipment. It would raise the cost substantially. So we didn't, I'll be perfectly honest, we didn't know if the city of Sponsor could move this forward as quickly as they have, and they are. The city did their environmental clearance, they're in their design's substantially complete. They're seeking permits, they've started to talk to permit agencies. The permit agencies know a lot about this area because they've already granted permits to SMART. So the city's assuring us that they're gonna get all this done in time to build this with the SMART line to Larkspur. And so we're looking for funding quickly in order to do that construction in a May, June, and beyond time frame. They're short funding, and we've provided already $502,000 in funds. We're gonna, for the construction. By the way, we funded the environmental and a portion of the design with OBAC funds. So all of TAM's commitment to this is not shown on this sheet. But for the construction funds, we're looking at getting $502,000 from the CTC, which you approved back in December. They'll take action in March. MTC provided $1 million, a portion of which has been spent on design, and now we're going to apply the remainder of that, $550,000, to construction. The action before you is to redirect this $2.95 million from the southern segment of the north-south greenway. And we are asking, as a condition of this action, the city, county, and the private funding close the gap. There's the $498,000 of remaining funds is closed by a combination of city, county, and private money. The southern segment has $7.95 million program. We want to make sure the environmental money stays there to keep working on the environmental for that project. It'll have 6.45 million remaining. This is gonna be the source for the 2.95, and maybe not the best news in the world, but we're gonna have a shortfall on the northern segment. So the northern segment has several elements of cost increase that we're anticipating bringing back to you in the next few months. We're seeking grants to help close the gap. We're hopeful Caltrans will contribute to widening this Caltrans bridge over the creek. So that's looking promising that they could help close that gap. And we've got regulatory agency permit costs higher than anticipated. We've got construction management double what we anticipated. And we've got construction cost increases that are being experienced in Marin. So we're having to look at current cost environment. Shame on us for underestimating the project. So the reality is to get that project constructed, it's gonna cost more, the northern segment, than what we anticipated. But even under that scenario, we believe this 2.95 million recommendation is solid in terms of moving funds to the multi-use path. We've had a lot of questions from the local jurisdictions as well as our bike advocacy folks as to, you're gonna move money off this funded project, how are you gonna backfill? So we do have some plans for backfilling the funds, and this is just a quick review of what we would be seeking over the next year in terms of grant funding. This could be our active transportation program grant that comes through both CTC with a regional share that comes through MTC. Our local partnership program, also these are both new SB1 programs. So we're hopeful there. The Bay Area Quality Management District Bike Facilities Grant Program is another strong candidate for us as a backfill. We're gonna have a future cycle of federal money called OBAG Cycle 3. And then Regional Measure 3 of Passed by Voters has a substantial pool of funds for Bay Trail segments, and the southern segment is part of the Bay Trail. So could we capture some of those RM3 funds? So, you know, we don't want to walk away from this southern segment project. It's got several years of environmental design and right-of-way acquisition. But we want to move the money temporarily to a project that's ready to go. That really is the message that we want to leave with you today, is to temporarily redirect those funds. This project's going to come with some conditions. I mentioned that the city and county and private funds were going to have to come into play to close the gap. The city needs to agree to use other fund sources first before using these RM2 funds. Ideally, the city will complete the project under the current estimate with no additional funds from TAM. The project isn't delivered with the SMART extension, which is why we're running to the finish line here, is to try not delay SMART. Then the funds are going to be returned to TAM if this doesn't work out. And then any savings need to go back to the Greenway project. Any savings on the multi-use path from Second to Anderson, because we need to keep working on this Greenway project in Corte Madera Larkspur. I do need to mention something that's not in your memo, which is this. Back in December 2016, MTC took action to guarantee funding for SMART, for lost lease revenue, as well as removal costs for us being able to build the southern segment of the North-South Greenway on the SMART right-of-way out on the levee. MTC adopted a condition that any savings from the North-South Greenway are to be applied to the permanent facility for the San Rafael Transit Center. There is concern, particularly by SMART, not Golden Gate, that their responsibilities for funding the transit center should become part of this discussion, that we should not be moving money off the North-South Greenway because it kind of doesn't, aid them in funding the Bettini Transit Center. So we gotta talk more about this with SMART and Golden Gate. And there's a meeting coming up this Wednesday. MTC is sponsoring these discussions now. There may be additional conditions we need to bring back to you at a future meeting. But TAM is gonna stand by as staff its recommendation for you to take action today. But we do need to work out any of these concerns that still remain on this with SMART. And again, there's no concerns by Golden Gate and the city of San Rafael regarding any interpretation of that condition. Anyway, just to kind of finalize this, this would be the approval of a resolution authorizing me to submit a request to MTC. They're the final decision maker on this, to allocate $2.95 million directed to the multi-use path from Second to Anderson. There's an update in what they call initial project report. We're going to have to execute a funding agreement with San Rafael and to prioritize the southern segment, which is giving up this money for future grant opportunities. We need to backfill this, and we need to find a way to backfill this. I would also add another condition on this, that we bring back any additional conditions associated with this resolution of the SMART concerns on any funding from the North-South Greenway being applied instead to the Bettini Transit Center. In October or December of 2016, we had no positive outlook for funding for the Bettini Transit Center. It's sitting solidly thanks to you in Regional Measure 3 and the actions you took last year for $30 million. So we'll know a lot more on June 5th, whether it's got at least a starting amount of 30. I know we are supporting Dennis Mulligan in seeking a TIRCP grant. That's a program under cap and trade that got a boost from SB1 for an additional $15 million. Dennis is going to pursue a Tiger grant to try and bring funds into the transit center. And we have a pool of funds also in RM3 that's for North Bay transit improvements. So it could feasibly gain some money from there. So this context and situation for the transit center is looking up. It wasn't looking so good back in December of 2016. But I think all of us have pulled forward. You, by the way, have put the only money into the transit center besides what we've gotten some money from San Rafael and Golden Gate, but we put $1.25 million in the transit center for environmental and design. So I think we're going to stay committed to the transit center, and the RM3 and the other grant programs, as well as MTC's commitment to make sure this gets done. I think we can count on. I don't think we're afraid of doing this small move of $2.95 million that will suddenly risk the transit center not being able to afford. I think the transit center has got some good opportunities coming up in the future. So that completes the staff report on this, Madam Chair, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, that was a lot of information.
Yeah.
Do we have questions? Please, Judy. Vice Chair Judy.
I think that's a very good explanation, and I would hope that as part of the resolution, we could add what you just said regarding if something comes out of this Wednesday meeting that necessitates a change, we'll bring it back. And well, I guess you have to go to the public first. I was going to say I can make the motion, but
Well, let me
Yeah.
see, are there any other comments? Yes, Eric, please, and then the mayor.
Dan, you mentioned the $2.95 million feels real solid. Ultimately, who's the lead agency in the construction of this project and the management of it?
We're the recipient. I think we would even need to reach agreement with the city who I believe is going to be hiring the contractor that Smart's using out there to build the path. Bill says yes, he's the project manager for the city. And so then we would, the action would be us reaching agreement with San Rafael to pass the money through to them. MTC needs to give the money to us because we're a recipient of RM2, not the city is not an eligible recipient. So the city would be the lead and hire the contractor. And then the coordination, Bill, do you want to say anything about the coordination with this Smart? Bill Guerin,
Bill Guerin with the City of San Rafael.
Yeah.
We're actually coordinating with Smart's contractors. We have their designer on board doing the design for us, so the plan is completely integrated with the SMART plan for their rail line. And we intend to hire the construction firm as well. And it's set up as a MOU with SMART that we have the ability to access their contractors in order to integrate the path into the rail line. So it's going to be all done by the SMART contractor, but it's going to be a contract with Sandra.
Great. All right, and based on all that, feel confident in the numbers?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
I saw him, he said
yes. Yeah.
I didn't get out my checkbook.
Stephanie?
Yes, Commissioner Phillips, did you have a comment?
Just a couple of things.
Katie?
First, I want to thank Diane for giving this considerable thought and bringing this proposal to us. I think it's quite creative, and it's very much appreciated, I would suggest, by not just San Rafael, but the entire county, because this is an important link for all of us. It happens to be in our backyard, but it really will serve all of those within the county that wish to utilize the path. So we're appreciative. Two conditions were put up with regard to San Rafael and this project, which we agree with. There's a little background. The basic deal, I guess it was 6 months or so that we've been working on this with SMART was, look, you guys come up with permits, you come up with the funding, and we will agree to construct it as Bill suggested. So we do have that agreement with SMART. It's in place. We have filed for the necessary permits. It's going to be close. We knew that, but we think that, at least our consultants think that we will have it in time for the construction. And then with the funding, it still leaves us $498,000 short. San Rafael has committed $200,000. The county has stepped up. We'll determine how much that might be, but the county has stepped up and been very helpful in this process. So we're fortunate in that regard. It is ready to go, as you know. Tracks are being laid now. We're all anxious to find our way to Larkspur and that service line. And as Diane mentioned, we're absolutely convinced, and I suspect you might be as well, it's sort of somewhat intuitive. If we do it now, it's going to cost a fair amount of money, no question about that. If we do it later, my guess it will never happen, or it'll cost, my guess, twice as much, just because of the obstacles in place. So we are appreciative of, and I would suggest that we, the county, not we, San Rafael, but we, the county, are appreciative of this link being in place. We also will support, if there's any question about it, I suspect there's not, but if there's any question about it, certainly when RM3 passes, I would guess, in June, all indications are such that we would be supportive of course, this backfill that's been referenced to. That seems only fair to me, and that's what we do. So we appreciate it and hope for your consideration.
Thank you. Commissioner Rice?
Yeah, on the city and the county working together with hopefully some private folks to come up with that $490,000 gap, what happens if that money, if we don't achieve all of that, just hypothetically? Is that the end of the project? And are you associating that with some element of the funding that can come at a later date, so there's time? It was the first I've heard of this, the only reason I asked.
That's a really good question. Of course, we've been concerned about that ourselves, and that's why we being San Rafael, agreed to put up $200,000 for this to shrink it some. The county, that's for you guys to decide, but there'll be some element, let's say. Diane has come up with a suggestion as a guarantee, if you will, that we will have that funding, but it will impact San Rafael in a fairly significant way if we have to go that route. So we're hoping to access private funding, and we have a group that's working on that now.
And I think that this is actually, it's a really important project in a host of ways. I mean, it's not just serving potentially commuters on that MUP, but Davis Middle School, I mean, all sorts of, so I do think that the alignment and the project is important, and I understand the shovel readiness, and I will probably be willing to support this, but I want to hear from other folks. But it's hard to always feel like we're having to be so reactive and a little bit of tail wagging the dog, and I can just want to say with another hat I wear, San Rafael Sanitation District is having to come up and spend probably close to $600,000 of unplanned capital improvement to accommodate this flip and an improved path. I think in the 2020 hindsight, this would have been the design, but it's I think it's uncomfortable to constantly be put in this position of being reactive and frankly moving money away from projects that we want to see funded. Though I think in this instance, given that this is shovel ready and we've got some issues down south, I understand it, but I just want to express that.
Yeah, Commissioner Conley.
Yeah, and I'll even put a finer point on my colleagues' remarks. This path was precisely the type of project that voters envisioned when they passed SMART and were promised a usable multi-use path as part of the rail project. This segment in particular, as was noted, achieves a whole host of critical goals. So I think the voters are paying attention and want to see if we can finish closing this gap. And I think this is a viable plan to do so. We've heard loud and clear concerns about if we move this money, what then happens to the other critical component of the North-South Greenway in central Marin. And I believe we've committed to also find solutions for that as well at the right time.
Thank you. I have been working on trying to complete the southern segment of the Greenway for years. You all know that I've been a huge advocate for this, but I recognize the urgency, time-wise, of completing the pathway in San Rafael. So I 100% support shifting the funds to make that happen. But I will say that there are a couple of avenues of funding that I think this board especially might want to consider sending letters to seek. In our packet and in the presentation, Diane and Bill mentioned that they're going to Caltrans to try to get some of the funding for the northern segment cost overruns. I think that is a very legitimate request, considering the amount of money that this agency put from RM2 into that project that benefits the Caltrans facility itself. So rather than leaving it to staff to try to negotiate, Diane, I would encourage you to consider whether or not a strongly worded letter from this board might be appropriate to send to Caltrans to ask them to step up and maybe to kind of take care of part of that cost overrun for the northern segment. That will take a little pressure off the transfer needed for the southern segment. In addition, I would like to see SMART step up with some funds for the second to Anderson pathway. The voters voted for rail and pathway, not just rail. So I think it's time for SMART to step up and do the right thing and work on closing this funding shortfall. I'm very concerned about that one slide that talked about condition number 4 from the December 14, 2016 guarantee of funding to SMART for the lost lease revenue. That says any savings from the North-South Greenway project are to be applied to the permanent, not interim, relocation facility for the San Rafael Transit Center. Conditions have changed. This is not a savings that is being transferred to the second to Anderson, and I'm concerned that this language is being used to somehow maybe put some barriers in the way of this transfer. So I wanted to point out that Regional Measure 2, when it was first passed by the legislature, called for a multi-use path from the Warnham area of Corte Madera all the way to the Bettini Transit Center. That was the goal. The Calpart Hill Tunnel pathway was the first part of that. The Greenway was to be the second part of it, and then of course now we're working on second to Anderson. But specifically, and this is the wording the actual language in RM2. Provide enhanced regional and local access around the Greenbright interchange to reduce traffic congestion, and provide multimodal access to the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge and Larkspur Ferry Terminal by extending a multi-use pathway from the vicinity of Warnham Drive to east of Francis Drake Boulevard and the Cal Park Hill rail right-of-way. And it goes on to then talk about right-of-way approaches for bicycle and pedestrian access to connect the San Rafael Transit Center with the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. So I think if we consider what the original legislative intent of RM2 is, it is very logical to shift these funds from the Greenway up to the Second to Anderson, but not necessarily the Transit Center. That is a project that I think can seek funding down the road. I want to see the Second to Anderson built, and I'm concerned that if this doesn't go smoothly and we get everybody on board with this, that there might be further hurdles, and I would like this board to just be cognizant of that, and let's get this done.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to public comment. I'm going to move from questions into comments. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Okay, Mr. Schumberg, anyone else who wants us to speak on this? And Maureen? Okay, good.
I'd like to make 2 points. The first is an extension of Commissioner First's comments, which is that I think linguistically it would be entirely appropriate to consider Second Anderson as part of the North-South Greenway, period. And therefore, there are no savings because it's under construction. My other comment, and so I don't believe that point number 4 is in any way relevant. My second comment is that I don't believe the conditions of this transfer have been framed appropriately. I think there's a serious mistake there, and that's the result of having too narrow a viewpoint, namely a TAM institutional viewpoint. I think the appropriate frame of reference ought to be, what will it take to be sure that the critical parts of this project get done? You don't achieve that by setting a bar saying the entire financial package has to be pulled together before one dime of TAM gets spent. I believe that's the implication of what these conditions are. I think, as I had said to the city of San Rafael, I think it's far smarter to give San Rafael this money to get the critical part of this pathway done, the part that is immediately adjacent to the rail line, and allow San Rafael to take care of whatever else needs to get funded. It's either going to get built or not, but to get this critical part done, that can't be done readily when the trains are rolling. That's the part that this meeting is all about today, and I believe the proposed conditions actually interfere with making that happen. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next speaker, please. Yeah, go ahead and pop up. Patrick, yeah.
My name is Patrick Seidler from Transportation Alternatives from Marin. I'd first like to start by thanking the Executive Director and the TAM staff. I actually disagree with that, David. I thought that was one of the best written memos I've seen from staff in 20 years of watching it. And they had to dance around things that were so complicated you wouldn't believe it. So my hat's off to you. Good work. And I'd also like to thank the City of San Rafael. I've been working with the mayor and Bill and his team in San Rafael, and they've done a Herculean effort in this project. If you'll remember, when this thing started, we were told by SMART that the pathway wouldn't fit in there. And our nonprofit has a unique relationship with this project. We went out and hired engineers, and we showed you could do it. And what did you guys say? You said, we're not Seidler, he's not an engineer. He doesn't even work for us. And so we had to go out and get money and do a study. And what did the feasibility study show? It showed that there was 4 alternatives that you could get that pathway to work. And then what do? We needed to bring it up to 30% engineering. You guys did that. You took the initiative to do that. And then we needed to get the environmental clearances. San Rafael did that. They got the environmental clearances.
and now San Rafael's getting the permits. We entered into a memorandum of understanding with SMART, with the city, with the county, and we have achieved every one of those conditions. Every one of the, get the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West. We got them all. And here we are today. And I have to tell you, it's a tough situation because TAM's also uniquely connected with the southern portion of the Greenway. We were the ones that went to MTC and took the money out of the other projects and put them in that project working with the MTC. We were the guys that did that to get a completion of the North-South Greenway, which we've been talking about for years. So you can imagine how difficult it is for us as an advocate organization and the other advocates in this room, the MCBC, the Bay Trail, the neighborhood groups. Think about how hard it is for Larkspur and Corte Madera, and my hat's off to you guys. They were promised a trail that was to be completed in 2018. And they're stepping up to the bar and they're saying, we're willing to go with a promise and a handshake on your guys backing it, that we're going to get back to that southern part of the connection. So here we are with one of the toughest decisions that we've ever been faced with, and here's the answer. Take a step back. When you take a step back, you know what you get? You get the executive director's report. It's the Greenway. It's not just one segment or the other. It's how do we get this whole thing complete? And what it does is it breaks the decision-making process down very easily. We need this money for the Anderson II project. It's a mission critical. And if you guys doubt it, go out there in the weekends. You can walk next to the unnamed waterway. It's going to be next to an operating rail line. There's no way you're getting in there to build a pathway. You can do it with a helicopter. There's no way you're getting in there. This is the time to do it. And so the mayor, San Rafael, Transportation Authority, Marin, you, this body, we're looking for you to make a great decision. This is the good decision. Tough one. You have to think it out. But this is the right decision to allocate those funds and to step up and think about how we can get other funding to get the backfill on the southern segment. So I want to again thank the executive director, thank the TAM, and thank you guys so much for supporting the Greenway, how much you have. Thank you for getting it complete. And this is a step, when this is done, this will be the thing that tips it forward. What do they call that? The tipping point. That's right, the tipping point. So this is it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
Coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to win this one.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, staff, everyone. Maureen Gaffney with the San Francisco Bay Trail Project. I think you all know how long we've been involved in this project, and with the south segment, the north segment, the crossing, all of that good stuff with our partners at MCBC and all of the other great advocates in the room. Bay Trail is loath to see any segments defunded, and particularly a piece of trail as important as the southern segment of the North-South Greenway. However, the Bay Trail intends to adopt the second to Anderson pathway as it is a far superior alignment to the current one, which is just bike lanes on the Anderson between the Cal Park Hill Tunnel and the Mission Creek pathway. So we're sort of opportunistic that way. If we see something that can either move the trail closer to the shoreline or presents a far superior alternative, which this is, a Class 1 pathway versus bike lanes and sidewalks, we go ahead and move forward to, see if the city or the jurisdiction is interested in doing that. They make a request to the Bay Trail Board of Directors, and we move forward thusly. That's what's happening here. So, that does pit one Bay Trail gap against another, southern segment, second to Anderson. We fully understand the timing issue and the need to build second to Anderson at the same time as the rail. So with the strong assurances that we've received from TAM staff that they will do everything in their power to A, borrow as little as possible from the southern segment, and B, to apply for each and every grant possible to backfill any borrowing that does occur, we are cautiously in support of the proposed reallocation. And we'd like to recognize the tremendous work and resources that the City of San Rafael has put towards this very important project in order to move the path forward at the same time as the rail, and again, TAM staff as well, and all of you. We don't ever like coming here and saying, yeah, that thing we've been working on for 15 years, you can just move the money and we'll find it somewhere else. But this is really, we do understand the critical nature of this. So thank you for your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Bjorn Gutenberg, Marin County Bicycle Coalition. We sent a letter to you today, so I'm really just here to reiterate a lot of the points made in that letter and really to thank everyone involved. And first, actually, I have to thank Maureen for getting up to speak after Patrick, so that I didn't have to do that. But really, no, thank you. You know, it's been said already, but we really appreciate all the work that the City of Santa Fe has done. Their council, their staff, their consultants to bring this project to this point where it is shovel ready, and we can move forward with it. Obviously, they were given a really difficult situation, a really tight timeline to bring that project up to full environmental review and bring it up to a certain level of design so that it can be passed off, and they've done that, so they deserve a lot of kudos. We also do need to thank the county for funding the feasibility study that proved that this pathway is possible, and to TAM for continuing to build all of these creative funding opportunities and doing, in this case, what we know isn't easy. We hope that we can thank SMART for honoring their agreement to work in good faith to build this project along with rail extension. And obviously, it's also important to acknowledge, as the staff report does, that this situation is less than ideal. So we do want to reiterate our full support for the southern segment and the implementation of the full north-south Greenway Gap Closure project. And in addition to supporting the conditions that were outlined in the staff report, we do want to request that the City of Santa Fe continues to pursue grant funds for this project, at least this year. There are a couple of funding opportunities that are in the pipeline. And we know that you're not taking action on the transfer of funds from the southern to the northern segment of the gap closure project, but we do have two asks there. One, that TAM prioritize the southern segment for active transportation grant opportunities moving forward. And second, to echo Commissioner First's points that we seek Caltrans, TAM seek Caltrans assistance in funding the shortfall on the northern segment. That is really important. That is a Caltrans facility, and at the end of the day, what's being funded is really the inadequacy of the Caltrans facility. So just to wrap things up, we MCBC ask that you recognize the importance of this project, not only for Santa Fe, but as Mayor Phillips said, really for the whole region, and move this request forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Right now, the school board's been on record supporting this particular solution for 2 years, and so I would really urge the board to support the staff report. It's something that's really important to us, particularly with the proximity to Davidson Middle School. We have 1,000 kids out there crossing Anderson, and that scares me literally. And so we really encourage you to do this. We appreciate the leadership that Mayor Phillips has done on this issue and covered all the bases. And now we're actually going to make it happen. So please support the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy, did you wish to speak?
Yes, I support the previous speakers. I think it makes a lot of sense to transfer the funds to San Rafael, but they're almost ready to start digging and concreting. I am concerned about the northbound off-ramp onto East of Francis Lake, which is part of the southern section, I think, normally. But I know that Bill Whitney is very concerned about that and working hard on it, and REU also. And I support Diane First's comment that we'll ask Caltrans to provide some funds for it. It's massively desired in that little corner of Luxford. At the first public outreach meeting, it was practically swamped because it's very much desired. So as soon as that can be done, great, but otherwise, I think you're moving 100% in the right direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll close public comment now. We'll bring it back for discussion. I'm sorry I didn't see you, Jean.
Yes, Jean Severinghus. I wanted to say that I'm delighted that TAM is considering helping Santa Fe. Santa Fe has done a yeoman's job on moving the trail to this point, and it is in fact part of North-South Greenway between the McKinney Transit Center and the Larkin Ferry Landing. I guess actually all the way to Warren, isn't it? I am concerned about a couple of things. SMART is actively in Santa Fe now, so Santa Fe has a time priority for a lot of people bringing their bikes and commuting in very less than ideal circumstances from the SMART station. So I'd say that funding this segment is really critical now. That same exact thing is going to be true in a year or two when SMART arrives in Larkspur, that we're going to need to fund and finish both the northern and the southern segments for the majority of people to use who don't feel comfortable riding in the street. So I think that we shouldn't take any focus off of the northern and southern segments. The northern segment is close to construction ready, and Caltrans, as people have noted, will own that expansion and really should be urged by you as a commission to provide more funding for that. Caltrans, by their own goals at congestion reduction and tripling the number of people biking and doubling the number of people walking by 2020, which is 2 years from now, they have a new generation of Caltrans staff who's eager to move that vision forward for greenhouse gas reasons and others. The Congested Corridors program for 101 and a couple of other routes has $250 million annually coming to it from the SB1. That the Caltrans staff points out that they want to, quote, include multimodal projects on, across, or directly adjacent to 101, and they asked the Caltrans bike plan to please tell them, and the towns and cities to tell them what was shovel ready. This project, in fact, is now, the northern segment is back in the Congested Corridors program for 101 North for the next round of funding, which is really good news. Caltrans has recently hired as their sustainability team leader Jeannie Ward-Waller, who just did a really terrific job for Safe Routes to School statewide. Maybe that letter could ask for her help to make this northern segment get funded by Caltrans. So basically a new generation. It might be hard to get one arm of the octopus to talk to another. I know that TAM has really been pushing for the last year to try to get Caltrans, but I think there are multiple aspects of Caltrans at this time, so I urge you to write that letter. My concern about the southern segment is that timing-wise. So while I support the essentially $3 million going to Santa Fe, there's about $3.5 million, as I see it, as I understand it, so that's sort of left there in the southern segment after the 1.5 environmental. There are some needs which I think are critical right now. First of all, we've just gotten everybody on a page with the last public meeting to focus on the smart right-of-way for the majority of users who really need to be off the road. Larkspur has taken on improving the Redwood Highway as their own idea for a project. It's a completely separate item. As soon as we finish the environmental study, we will need to do a couple of things. At that point, we'll need to pay SMART the $890,000 to use the area which they have just now cleared. If you haven't seen it lately, they've taken off the junkyard tenant. So you can actually see the southern segment if you go down to the end of Industrial Way and look north and south, which is very exciting. So it's a timely thing. I'm concerned what SMART might do if, in fact, we don't get the $6.5 million that we're going to need right away to move forward. What might they do, or who might they lease that to? We don't have a signed agreement on that, in my understanding. So that's timely. The second thing is we're going to need to be negotiating with the two willing parties to acquire the crossover easement. There's no guarantees. There's people whose lives and businesses are a little bit up in a kind of a cloud right now because they don't really know what's coming next. So that's a timely thing. And I know that there's going to be mitigation needs that they're starting to see from the environmental study. So there's going to be money needed immediately, not in 2 or 3 years or 5 years. The funding sources that I'm seeing other than RM3 are really tiny. I know the Bay Area Air Quality funding, that's $2 million for the whole Bay Area. So $6.5 million is a big chunk of money. It's been very difficult to get the money for the northern segment from Caltrans. It's been very difficult to get the money for Santa Fe. So I don't think we should be overly confident that we can get all that money in a timely way. So in sum, I would urge that we not send any of the southern segment money on the northern segment, but that you do fund the Santa Fe segment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll bring it back, Commissioner Arnold. I just wanted the members of the SMART board to recall that SMART previously attempted to include the pathway in the federal grant, but was denied permit by 3 federal and state agencies. So they tried hard to get this done. The other thing that they have done, of course, is to allow the multi-use pathway to be constructed within the smart right-of-way from Anderson Drive to Second. And I'm happy to make the motion with the one comment from the executive director to be included in that, just regarding the upcoming meeting Wednesday.
Second.
Is there any further discussion?
Comments?
Yes, please, Commissioner Rodoni.
I just wanted to support Diane's suggestions about at least reaching out to Caltrans and SMART about helping with the funding. I'm very supportive of this transfer, with the understanding that I do know that the southern segment is a ways away yet, and that everyone is committed to finding funds for that, which is really important. And thank you, Gene, for putting out some other issues. But I'd like to change, if I may, make a motion to change one word in the resolution, and that's where it says the director to seek funds. I want to say prioritize there, because I think that's the commitment I'd like this commission to make, that they're prioritizing, that this south section will be a priority for this commission, and I think that's important in making this transition, and I see the mayor nodding his head, so, but I'd like to change that one word to prioritize from seek. And I'll move that.
So I guess he doesn't care.
Dennis, I'm sorry, where is
Okay, so
this
this is
word?
a resolution.
Yes.
at the end.
Right.
It refers to the executive director to seek future funds, and I want to prioritize, remove seek and put prioritize that.
Oh, okay.
It's in the second page.
Yeah, second page, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph, right margin. Is there further discussion before we, and who was the second? I'm sorry.
I was the
Yes.
second.
Thank you.
Dan.
Yes, Val.
Judy was the
Judy
Yes.
was the
So I,
maker.
was that a motion
Well,
from you?
it's
And was it
The maker of the
seconded?
motion needs to accept the amendment.
We'll have, yeah, we'll change it.
Seconded.
And it's a
Okay.
moot
And I'll
point.
accept it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I believe we've come to the end of our meeting and we are adjourned, unless there's anything else.